Everybody ready? Okay. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here today. Today marks the 5th day since the House of Representatives left town on a 1-month vacation. They are not scheduled to be back in town until April 4th. Even though the House Republicans fought last week to try to keep them in session to do their job, Speaker Madigan and his caucus steamrolled them and said, we're leaving town on March 3rd and we're not coming back until April 4th. That's outrageous. That's a dereliction of duty. That's a failure of Speaker Madigan and his caucus to do their jobs. We're in the middle of a budget crisis. We're in the middle of a higher education funding crisis. We're in the middle of a MAP grant funding crisis. And they leave town with no solutions. It's wrong. They should get back here and do their jobs. There are bipartisan solutions on the table to deal with the crises we're facing. Right today, we could be funding our MAP grants if we would do procurement reform. Procurement reform would save Illinois government $500 million. That's more than the money we need to put into MAP grants. We could fund those right today, and the money would be there in the long run. It would be paid for. That's a solution. Many in the legislature in private support it. Speaker Madigan and his caucus refuse to call procurement reform. Likewise, President Cullerton and I have agreed on pension reform. That would save Illinois state government $1 billion a year. That money could go to MAP grants. That money could go to community colleges. That money could go to our universities. That money could go to some of our human services, Catholic charities that are hurting right now. Bipartisan solution. President Cullerton and I agree. President Cullerton won't call that bill. His bill, it's not my bill, it's his bill. I've agreed to support it as a compromise and a first step towards pension reform. Why hasn't he done it? He's made it clear that on tough issues, he's going to take his lead from Speaker Madigan. And Speaker Madigan and his caucus have left town. They're gone. They're on vacation. They're not doing their jobs. We are not solving the crises before us. We could do it on a bipartisan basis. Likewise, Representative Phillips, Representative Duncan have sponsored a bill. It's not my bill. It's not necessarily my first choice, but I've looked at the bill. I'll support it. That's a bipartisan bill to take some special purpose funds that are idle right now, that are basically gathering dust, that we'll never need, they're excess, and apply those to our university funding so that Chicago State can stay open, so that Eastern Illinois University can be funded, so that Western Illinois University can be funded. Governor State can receive some money and stay open while we're negotiating a broader budget compromise. Bipartisan solution, it's real, it can be paid for, the cash is there. Speaker Madigan won't call that bill. It's a real bill, it's bipartisan compromise. Speaker Madigan would rather go on vacation. He'd rather have his caucus, the Democrats in the House, go on vacation for a month while this crisis brews. And our people are being hurt. Our universities are being hurt. Our students are being hurt. Stunning failure on the part of Speaker Madigan and his caucus in the House. I call on President Cullerton. Right today, the Senate is in session. I call on President Cullerton to call a vote on his pension reform bill. Let's pass that. Use that money to fund our universities, to fund our MAP grants. Call that bill. Vote on it. The other thing I call on President Cullerton to do is pass our school funding bill. Pass funding for K-12 education. Clean, no games. No games. We cannot let Illinois schools be held hostage for a Chicago school bailout. President Cullerton is sending the message. He doesn't want to call school funding. He wants to make sure that Chicago gets a bailout, and Chicago gets a lot more money. That is wrong. We cannot let that happen. Our schools cannot be held hostage for a Chicago city bailout. The Chicago machine cannot dictate terms to the school children of the rest of the state of Illinois. That is wrong. We cannot let it happen. The current school funding formula was not created by me. It is flawed. I've agreed it's flawed. But last year, President Cullerton, Speaker Madigan were not holding school funding hostage for more money for Chicago. The year before, with Governor Quinn, they weren't holding school funding hostage for a new funding formula. When they created the school funding formula 20 years ago, the Democrats, Speaker Madigan, and when they updated it in 03-04 under Governor Blagojevich, the Democrats in the General Assembly, they created the school funding formula. They didn't hold school funding hostage for a Chicago bailout. This year, because Chicago is so financially mismanaged and so broke, sliding towards bankruptcy, they're threatening to hold up the entire school funding system to help Chicago. That is wrong. We cannot allow that to happen. Schools in Illinois should come first. And to help our schools, we need Speaker Madigan and his caucus to get back in town and do their jobs. This is no time for them to take a one-month vacation. It's wrong. This is regular session time. We shouldn't have to call a special session to get them back here and do their jobs. We shouldn't have to cost taxpayers another $40,000 a day to call a special session to force them here. They should do their jobs. They should be here meeting, negotiating reforms to protect taxpayers, grow our economy, balance our budget, and get money to our schools that are in crisis, our universities, and our low-income children. That's what they should be doing. They've got to get back here, do their jobs. Speaker Madigan and his caucus got to stop failing and doing a dereliction of duty, get back in town, do their jobs, get to work. Let's negotiate some real bipartisan solutions. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
Would you call them back if they don't come back?
You know, other governors have done attempts at that over the years. It's never worked. And the reality is, the last time I asked the four leaders to get together with me to talk about bipartisan solutions, Speaker Madigan didn't even show up, just didn't bother to show up. He's going to do what he decides to do. And what I'm not going to do is call a special session and force taxpayers to pay another $40,000 a day to the legislators when they should be here anyway doing their jobs. That's not right. And the House Republicans fought last week hard to keep them in session. Speaker Madigan and the Democratic caucus steamrolled them and left town.
Governor, are you comfortable with the fact that one person, Dan Proft, has distributed about $2 million to candidates that you like? Is that something that you've contributed to funds that have contributed to him and Liberty Principles? He spent more than $1.5 million already on just the Sam McCann race. Are you comfortable with one person doing that? Do you like Dan?
I'm not going to comment on political races today.
Why not? You were out campaigning yesterday.
Any other questions?
Or what?
Any other questions? I'm here every day working.
Yeah, well, yesterday you were Southern Illinois with
I was on the phone all day yesterday working on state business.
Governor, yes, you were talking a little bit about, they need to be here, they have to be here working, the Senate's here working. Why not risk the $40,000 quote-unquote investment to bring them back here and force them to work? Why not take that risk?
Why should that be necessary? Why won't Speaker Madigan and his caucus do their jobs? They passed a phony bill before they left town that basically said, let's authorize spending of almost $3 billion for universities and various human services with no way to pay for it as a way to spin politically. And they tried to call it compromise. That's not a compromise. That does not have bipartisan support. That does not have my support. That's an attempt to spin the headlines for some of your viewers and your listeners. It's a phony bill. It's a sham vote. They know it. They know I'm going to veto it. They didn't have a veto-proof majority on it. They know that. It's a sham bill, phony vote for election politicking, which is what Speaker Madigan's caucus is spending their time on. They're on vacation for a month. A month. You can understand a day or two. A month? That's wrong.
Governor, you say vacation, that calls to mind maybe a fancy drink with a little umbrella in it. I don't know if they're all doing that, but there are 118 in the House. And when they all come back, they would do what? And typically it's the governor and the leaders, and then, hey, everyone come back, we got something for you to vote on. It's kind of top down. How do you expect it to go if they all show up tomorrow?
Well, there are bills that could be called for a vote. There are bills that exist for funding MAP grants, for funding our university system. Representative Phillips, Representative Duncan have introduced bills. The president has a specific bill on pension reform. We could vote on these bills. We could vote, it exists, we could vote on school funding to make sure that our schools open on time. They should be our top priority. They're not calling the votes on the real bills, they're calling votes on sham bills, phony bills that can be spun for election politics.
You could argue that's what they do when they're all here, like when they were all here last week. I mean, it's not Ken Duncan who decides what bill gets called. He's not exactly a legislative powerhouse now.
Speaker should be here. Speaker Madigan should be in town right this very minute, negotiating bipartisan compromise with real solutions. Right this minute, they should be here. The Senate's here. The Senate's working today. I'm here today. We could be negotiating bipartisan compromise, real solutions, and I'm here tomorrow. I'm here the next day. I'm here on Friday morning. We could be working this out. Speaker Madigan should be in town, holding meetings, negotiating true bipartisan solutions, real answers, rather than failing our students and failing the taxpayers of the state.
You mentioned a meeting that you had called a couple months ago that Speaker Madigan didn't show up to. I mean, it doesn't seem like negotiations have gone anywhere the past 9 months that we've been doing this. I mean, has there been any sort of progress? Are you calling for more progress? What does that progress look like?
Well,
Getting a budget this year?
I'm certainly calling for progress, and I'm certainly willing to compromise. What we've got to do is stop spending money that we don't have. We've been doing that for decades. We've got to stop pushing employers out of the state. We've got to stop this runaway, irresponsible government that we've had in Illinois. Speaker Madigan right now is not doing his job. He's not here in town voting on bipartisan compromise. There are ways to help our students with their MAP grants. There's ways to help our university system stay open and avoid layoffs at our universities. There are answers, bipartisan, that I support, that many Democrats support, but Speaker Madigan is not here. He is not calling those bills, and he's not taking the vote.
Why do you think that would change now, a week before the primary, or even before November, when it's very clear that these battles are drawn along political lines, not budgetary?
Because it should change. You know what? Government in Illinois has got to start working for the people. For too long, the politicians have run the system for their own benefit, for their insiders in government. They should be here doing their jobs. This is time for regular session. This is not time for vacation. The regular session is right now. We shouldn't have to call a special session. We shouldn't have to spend an extra $40,000 a day. And there are bipartisan answers to our school funding and to help our MAP grants. Speaker Madigan and his caucus should be doing the right thing, not the politically expedient thing.
Governor, Jack Francis said that a smart businessman would invest $40,000 a day in order to try to save $33 million that's going out in extra spending the state doesn't have. Can you respond to that?
It's never worked in the past. Other governors have tried to call special sessions and force. The force doesn't come from me. It comes from your listeners and your viewers. The force comes from the people of Illinois. If you get the message out there to your readers, your listeners, your viewers, that's where the pressure comes for Madigan to actually be responsible and not only work for the Chicago political machine, but to have his caucus work for the people of Illinois. The pressure comes from the people, not me. That's a fact. And the people of Illinois need to rise up against Speaker Madigan and his caucus, his Chicago political machine, and get this legislature working for all the people of Illinois again, not the insiders.
Governor, why do you say that? Is there an example of when, as you just put it, the people motivate the speaker and the lawmakers to do something? Can you name an example of when that's happened in the past?
Well, as you see, there are people who come every day to lobby. There are people who come to protest. There are people who come to vote. There are people who call, who send letters, who send emails to the legislators. That's how democracy works. We need democracy to get restored in Illinois, and we need the people to put pressure on members of Speaker Madigan's caucus to do the right thing, get real compromise, get real solutions. Don't just try to spin things and force a massive tax hike. Get real solutions for the long term and do your job. Get in town, meet with the governor, meet with members of the Senate, get bipartisan solutions.
Governor, what do you say to the half a million voters who told Paul Simon Institute that they disapprove of the job you've been doing over the past year? You're talking about democracy and the voters. What do you say to that message from voters?
I say that polls are lovely. They go up and down. They're all over the place. They're not the basis to govern on.
What do you think of
Is that-
President Obama advertising against Ken Duncan?
Again, I'm not going to comment about specific races in politics.
Have you contributed to the
Okay.
Illinois Opportunity Project?
I'm
Have you
sorry?
contributed money to the Illinois Opportunity Project?
Which one?
That's one of Dan Proft's groups.
Yeah. Have you given money to that?
I don't, I'd have to check, I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody.